Poppy Fairwood had no idea her life was about to change forever when she slid into the last empty seat at the corner booth of the bustling downtown café across from a man in a tailored charcoal suit and an unreadable expression. "Sorry," she said breathlessly, brushing her windblown hair out of her face. "It's crazy in here. Mind if I sit?" The man looked up from his coffee, surprised. His eyes were a sharp steel blue, his jaw clean-shaven, and his wristwatch probably cost more than her rent. Yet, he nodded with a quiet, "Of course." She gave him a quick smile, dropping her tote bag beside her. "Thanks. I was 2 seconds from giving up and eating a granola bar on the curb." He chuckled under his breath. "That sounds tragic." "It is," she deadpanned. "I'm Poppy, by the way." "Xavier," he said, offering his hand across the table. "Xavier Hale." She shook it, noting how warm and steady his grip was. "Nice to meet you, Xavier Hale. You don't look like someone who eats granola bars on curbs, and you don't look like someone who settles for curbs." Poppy laughed, and something about how her eyes crinkled when she did made Xavier tilt his head slightly, curious. She was wearing an oversized sweater and jeans, her hair tied up messily, no makeup. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, but she was beautiful in a way that made him forget his espresso. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the clatter of cups and the hum of other conversations filling the space between them. Poppy glanced at the paper in front of her, a crumpled resume with coffee stains. "Job interview?" Xavier asked, nodding toward it. She blinked. What gave it away, the desperate look or the resume that's been through a war? "Both." She gave a half laugh, leaning back. "Yeah. Interview number 4 this week. I'm starting to think the universe is trying to tell me to just open a dog-walking business." Xavier raised an eyebrow. "What's the job?" "Marketing coordinator. Startup. I probably won't get it." "Why not?" She shrugged. "Because I've been out of work for 3 months and every hiring manager wants a unicorn with 5 years experience and a Nobel Peace Prize." He studied her for a beat. "I think you're selling yourself short." Poppy blinked, caught off guard. "You don't even know me." "True. But I know when someone's underestimating themselves." She stared at him for a second, then looked back at her resume. "That's nice of you to say. It's not kindness. It's observation." Poppy tilted her head. "Are you always this straightforward?" "Only when I mean it." She smiled, something soft settling in her chest. He didn't look like a man who handed out compliments. And yet here he was, giving one to a stranger over shared table space and lukewarm espresso. A waiter passed and Xavier flagged him down effortlessly. "She's with me," he said without asking. "Get her whatever she wants. And a croissant. You look like you skipped breakfast." Poppy blinked. "You don't have to, I want to," Xavier cut in. "Let me." She hesitated, then nodded, her voice gentler. "Okay. Thanks." They fell into an easy rhythm. She ordered a cappuccino and a breakfast sandwich, and they sat there as if they weren't two strangers who just met by accident. Poppy told him about her last job, laid off due to budget cuts. He didn't talk much about himself, just said he worked in business strategy, whatever that meant. When her phone buzzed with an interview reminder, she sighed and stood. "I should go." Xavier stood too. "Good luck." She smiled. "Thanks again. For the food. And the company." "Poppy?" She turned as she slung her bag over her shoulder. "Yeah? If it doesn't work out today, maybe you and I could have lunch sometime." She paused. "You don't even know me." "I know I want to." She stared at him, this impossibly put-together stranger who had no reason to notice her, much less ask her out. Then she grinned. "Maybe." She left, the doorbell jingling behind her, and Xavier sat back down, watching her disappear into the crowd. Something about her had gotten under his skin in less than 30 minutes. And for a man who had everything, cars, homes, private jets, and more zeros in his bank account than most people would see in a lifetime, he suddenly felt like he wanted something real. He wanted her. The next day, Poppy walked into her tiny apartment, exhausted and numb. The interview had been a disaster. She flopped onto the couch and groaned into a pillow. She didn't even know why she was so disappointed. She'd known it was a long shot. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost declined it, but something made her answer. Hello? Poppy? Her heart stopped. Xavier? I hope this isn't too forward, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. I know I don't know your story, but I'd like to. She blinked hard, suddenly sitting up straighter. You called me. I did. She hesitated. How did you get my number? You left your resume behind. I might have. Read it. You read it. Just the contact part. I swear. She laughed, surprised. That's probably illegal. Only if you sue me. Tempting. Let me make it up to you. Dinner. Tonight. I'm not really in the mood to go out. Then I'll bring dinner to you. She paused. You don't even know where I live. I do now. She blinked again. You're something else. I'll be there in an hour. And just like that, he hung up. An hour later, Poppy opened her door to find Xavier standing there in a navy coat, holding a bag that smelled like heaven. Lobster ravioli from Bella Vista, he said simply. And tiramisu. Her jaw dropped. That place costs. Don't worry about it. He stepped inside, placed the food on her wobbly table, and looked around at the tiny studio apartment with zero judgment. You live here alone? He asked. She nodded. Yeah. It's small, but rent's cheap and my neighbor bakes a lot. He smiled. I like it. It's real. They sat on the floor eating from takeout boxes with mismatched forks and talking. Not about work or resumes or failures, but about favorite books, childhood memories, worst dates. When Poppy yawned, Xavier glanced at the clock. I should go. She stood with him, heart beating too fast. Thanks for dinner. He looked at her a long moment. Thanks for sharing your table yesterday. And then he leaned down, kissed her cheek gently, and left. Poppy stood frozen in her doorway. She didn't know what this was, but it was definitely something. The knock came just after sunset. Poppy opened the door to find Xavier holding a bouquet of white tulips and a bottle of wine so dark it looked like velvet in a glass. He wore a slate-gray shirt with the sleeves casually rolled, and his presence filled the doorway like he belonged there. You didn't strike me as a roses kind of woman, he said, tilting the bouquet toward her. These felt more like you. Poppy took the flowers gingerly, blinking. These are really beautiful. So are you, he said, stepping inside with the kind of ease that made her forget she'd scrubbed the apartment in a panic for an hour after work. She closed the door, trying not to think about her chipped nail polish or the fact that her couch still had a spring poking through the cushion. He didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. Xavier handed her the wine. No label. It's from a friend's vineyard in Umbria. Thought we could open it after dinner. You have friends with vineyards? I have. Connections. She raised an eyebrow. You're not a spy, are you? He laughed, a deep, warm sound. No, but that's the most interesting theory I've heard in weeks. She placed the tulips gently in a vase, then turned. You didn't have to bring anything. I wanted to. He glanced around. Should I set the table? Poppy hesitated. I never use it. I usually eat on the floor. Then the floor it is. They settled on the rug again, this time with takeout from a French bistro she'd never dared walk into. The scent of roasted duck and truffle butter filled the apartment in seconds. She poked at her portion with a fork. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Cassoulet, he offered smoothly, already cutting into his. It's better than it looks. You didn't grow up eating this kind of food, did you? No. I grew up on boxed mac and cheese and frozen burritos. But then life changed. She looked up. How? He set his fork down. My brother and I were raised by our mom. She worked 3 jobs. When I was 17, she passed away unexpectedly. We were left with nothing. I got into a business program on scholarship and I built from there. She didn't speak for a moment, surprised he'd offered something so personal without her asking. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Don't be. She taught me how to survive. The rest I figured out. Poppy watched him for a beat. What about your brother? He lives abroad. He's in finance. She nodded, then set down her own fork. So, what did you actually build? I mean, what do you do? He studied her as if weighing how much to say. I run a portfolio of companies. Mostly tech and hospitality. I invest, restructure, flip, or scale depending on the model. She blinked. Sounds intense. It is. But I like the challenge. And that makes you, she trailed off, not sure how to phrase it. Very comfortable, he answered simply. She laughed. That's one way to put it. Xavier leaned in slightly. You're not intimidated by that? Are you trying to intimidate me? No, he said, his voice low. I'm trying to see if you're different. I think you already know I am. Poppy felt the temperature shift between them, not in degrees, but in the way his gaze lingered on her face like he was memorizing it. She sat back, suddenly aware of how close they were on the rug. I don't usually let strangers bring me wine and duck and personal history, she said. I don't usually spend time with women who talk about dog-walking businesses and eat on the floor. She narrowed her eyes. Was that an insult? No, he said, his tone dipping. It was the first time in years I felt like someone was actually real with me. That silenced her. She looked down at the rim of her glass, then back up. You don't have to prove anything to me, you know. I'm not impressed by wine or expensive food. I know, he said. That's why I brought them. Not to impress you. Just to be with you. The blunt honesty of it landed hard, and she didn't know what to say. So she reached for the wine instead, pouring them both a glass. They didn't talk much after that. Instead, they played old records from her dusty shelf, talked about movies they hated, and debated the best late-night snacks. She learned that he hated olives, loved thunderstorms, and once got stuck in a Paris elevator for 3 hours. Hours passed like minutes. Near midnight, he stood, brushing crumbs from his trousers. I should let you sleep. Poppy walked him to the door, unsure what to say. The night had been perfect in the way that didn't feel real. And yet, when he turned to her, there was nothing uncertain in his face. I'm not playing games, Poppy. I didn't think you were. I like you. His voice was calm, steady. And I want to see where this goes. If you let me. She nodded slowly, heart thudding in her chest. Okay. He leaned down, kissed her forehead with a kind of reverence that made her chest ache, and then just like the first time he walked away without asking for anything more. The door clicked shut behind him, and Poppy stood there, barefoot on the linoleum, wineglass in hand, wondering how a man like that had ended up across her café table. And why it suddenly felt like he might become the most important thing in her life. The invitation arrived 3 days later, hand-delivered in a deep navy envelope with her name written in silver script. Poppy stared at it like it might vanish if she blinked too fast. Inside was a single card, dinner. 8 o'clock. Dress warm. Xavier, no address. No instructions. No explanation. Just a name that sent her heart into a tailspin. She almost didn't go. Work had been impossible all week, long hours at the boutique temp job she'd finally landed. Dealing with a manager who seemed to think fashion retail required military discipline. Her feet ached. Her paycheck barely covered groceries. And the last thing she felt like doing was leaping into the unknown with a man who could probably charter a plane on a whim. But curiosity and something deeper she didn't want to name yet won out. At exactly 7:30, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment. The driver stepped out without a word and opened the back door. Inside was a coat, a soft wool wrap in deep plum, and a note resting on the seat. Thought you might be cold. She ran her fingers over the fabric, stunned by the thoughtfulness. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't about money. It was just considered. The car drove for nearly 40 minutes out of the city and into winding hills lined with trees that had turned amber and rust with the season. Poppy watched the scenery shift, heart pounding with every mile. They stopped at a wrought iron gate she didn't recognize. Beyond it stood a stone path lined with lanterns, flickering gold in the dusk, leading to what looked like an old observatory perched on the cliff's edge. The driver didn't say a word, just gestured for her to follow the path. At the top, Xavier stood waiting in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, with the Pacific stretching out behind him like a velvet curtain. You found it, he said as she approached, wind curling through his hair. You sent a car. I think that helped. He smiled faintly. Did you eat today? She blinked. What? You work long shifts. You forget meals. Her brows lifted. How do you know that? I called your boutique and asked if you were scheduled. They told me you were on your feet for 10 hours. She stared at him. That's insane. No, he said, holding out a hand. That's concern. He led her inside the observatory. The interior had been transformed. Candles flickered along every shelf, and in the center was a small table for two beneath the domed ceiling, which had been left open to the night sky. A telescope stood nearby, its brass frame polished to a shine. I wanted tonight to be quiet, Xavier said, pulling out her chair. No waiters, no noise. Poppy sat slowly, taking it in. This place is mine, he finished. I bought it last year. It used to be abandoned. I've been restoring it. Why? She asked, genuinely curious. I needed somewhere no one could reach me. She looked up at the stars. It's beautiful. He poured her a glass of wine. So are you. She didn't blush. She didn't look away. She just met his eyes and said, You're very sure of yourself. Only when I'm right. Dinner was quiet at first. Roasted chicken with herbs, wild mushrooms, and a pear tart she couldn't stop eating. He didn't fill the space with small talk, didn't push her to be anyone but herself. When the plates were cleared, he stood and walked to the telescope. Come here. She joined him and he adjusted the lens. Look through. She peered in and gasped. That's Saturn. He nodded. You can see the rings tonight. She pulled back, awed. You planned this. I wanted to show you something rare. She turned to him, her voice softer now. Why me, Xavier? He didn't look away. Because you don't ask for anything. Because I could be a stranger in a café and you'd treat me like a person, not a name, not a wallet, not a brand. She tried to joke, but her voice cracked. That's kind of a low bar. It is. But it's real. They stood there, stars blinking above them, the air sharp with ocean salt and something unspoken. Then Xavier said, I'm leaving for London tomorrow. Her stomach dropped. For how long? A week, maybe 2. There's a deal I need to close. I wasn't going to tell you. I didn't want to ruin tonight. Poppy stepped back slightly. Then why did you? Because I don't want to ghost you. And I don't want to make promises I can't keep. His voice was steady. But I also don't want to lose whatever this is. So I'm telling you now. If you don't want to wait, I'll understand. She didn't answer right away. She walked back to the table, picked up her coat, then turned. I don't do flings. Neither do I. I mean it, Xavier. If this is just fun for you, it's not. She let out a breath, folding her arms. You're this unreachable person, and I don't want to start something I'll have to watch fade from a distance. Then don't watch, he said, stepping closer. Come with me. Poppy laughed, choked. Really? To London? Yes. I have a job. Quit. I don't have a passport. I can have it expedited. I don't have anything to wear. I'll take care of it. She stared at him. This is insane. No, it's clear. Poppy swallowed. Why now? Because I'm tired of waiting for things to be perfect. I've waited years, and nothing ever is. But this, he reached for her hand, holding it gently. This is the first thing that's felt right in a very long time. She didn't know what to say, so she kissed him. Not tentative, not polite. A kiss that said she was scared, but she was choosing this anyway. When they pulled apart, she whispered, You better not leave me stranded in Heathrow. He smiled against her lips. I'd never leave you anywhere. And with that, the stars above them blinked on, one by one, as if the sky itself was making a promise. The air tasted like rain and old paper in the library of the Hale townhouse in Kensington. Where Poppy stood staring out the window at the city she never thought she'd see with her own eyes. London buzzed beyond the glass-black cabs, glinting rooftops, and a sky that never quite committed to blue or gray. She turned as Xavier entered, freshly changed from a meeting, his tie loose and his expression unreadable. You didn't sleep, he said, shutting the door behind him. I did, Poppy replied, folding her arms. Just not much. He walked toward her slowly. Want to talk about it? She hesitated. You weren't at breakfast. I had to meet with the legal team. I know. She trailed off. You felt alone. I felt disposable, she corrected, lifting her chin. I know I'm not part of your world. I know I don't walk into rooms like I belong in them. But I'm not furniture, Xavier. I'm not something you leave behind because it's inconvenient. He stepped closer, a muscle twitching in his jaw. You think I brought you here to forget about you? I don't know why you brought me here, she said, voice quieter now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. Because of this. She took it from him slowly. It was the printout of her resume, the one she'd left behind in the café. Her old job title, her degree, the listing of volunteer work at a local arts nonprofit. Her heart kicked against her ribs. I read it the night we met, he said. I saw someone who didn't just survive, someone who gave back. Someone who spent her weekends painting murals in children's hospitals while working full-time. I'm not impressed by qualifications, Poppy. I'm impressed by character. She stared at the paper, her throat aching. Why are you showing me this now? Because I made a mistake, he said plainly. I let you come here without giving you anything to hold onto. I threw you into my world without a life raft. She looked up. And now I want to give you something permanent. He crossed the room to the fireplace mantel and picked up a slim velvet box. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said, opening it, revealing a delicate gold necklace with a single sapphire. Not yet, but I am asking you to stay. Her eyes didn't leave the necklace. Why the sapphire? It's the color of clarity, he said. And because it reminded me of your eyes when you get stubborn. She let out a slow breath, the tension in her shoulders easing. I don't want to be another thing you collect, she finally said. You're not, Xavier replied. You're the one thing I never saw coming. She stepped forward, letting him fasten the necklace around her neck. It sat just below her collarbone, cool and light, but it felt like gravity. I want something of my own, she said, turning to face him. Not just a borrowed life. Not just your orbit. Then let's build something together. I don't care if it's a nonprofit or a bookstore or a dog sanctuary in the countryside. Whatever you want, I'll back it. But it has to be yours. She blinked. You'd do that. I already made the first call this morning. There's a property outside Oxfordshire. You should see it. Poppy stared at him, stunned. You already... I'm not good at waiting, he said. I needed you to know I'm not just offering words. She felt the floor tilt beneath her, not from instability, but from the sheer weight of what he was handing her. A chance. A future. Not wrapped in diamonds or silk, but in belief. I've never had anyone believe in me like this, she whispered. Then it's about time. She kissed him then, not out of impulse but decision. It was different than before, deeper, anchored in something that had grown between them when they weren't even looking. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. You don't have to give me an answer now, he said. I already have one, she whispered. Yes, to all of it. The next morning, they drove out to Oxfordshire. The house was modest by Xavier's standards, an old brick cottage with ivy-laced walls, a greenhouse out back, and enough space to build something new. Poppy walked through the garden, boots sinking into wet grass, and saw it. A vision of kids with paintbrushes, of workshops for artists, of something meaningful built from her own hands. She turned to Xavier, who stood leaning against the car, watching her silently. This could work, she said. No, he corrected. You'll make it work. Weeks passed. The cottage became a haven. Poppy poured herself into the project, filing permits, connecting with local artists, shaping the curriculum, and Xavier was there for every step. Not as a benefactor, not as some silent figure behind a desk. He was there on weekends, rolling up his sleeves to help repaint the walls, sharing meals with the volunteers, sitting beside her on cold mornings with coffee and blueprints. One night, as winter curled around the windows and the fire crackled low, he handed her an envelope. She opened it slowly, brows furrowing. Inside was a deed with both their names. "I bought it for you," he said. "But I'm signing it over to us." She looked up, startled. "You don't have to. I want to build a life with you, not just give you one." Her chest tightened. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more certain." A year later, the center opened. It was called the Fairlight House, a place for young artists, for those starting over, for those who needed a place to belong. Poppy stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony in a soft gray dress, her hands trembling as she held the scissors and looked out at the crowd of supporters. Xavier stood just behind her, not in front, not overshadowing. Just there where she needed him. She cut the ribbon, and the crowd erupted, but her eyes found his. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Later that night, as they sat beneath the stars in the garden, her head resting against his shoulder, he whispered, "You changed everything." She smiled. "So did you." He kissed her temple and wrapped his arm tighter around her. "This is only the beginning." And it was. A beginning neither of them had seen coming. From a shared table in a crowded café, where a woman with nothing left to lose met a man who had everything except her. Now they had it all. Together. The moment the final paintbrush was cleaned and the last box of supplies was stacked neatly in the storage room, Poppy stepped outside and let the late spring air wash over her. The grand opening of Fairlight House had been a whirlwind. Press, donors, local families, artists from all around the countryside. But now it was hers. The day-to-day, the heartbeat of the place. And she didn't feel overwhelmed. She felt ready. From across the garden, she caught sight of Xavier, seated on the stone bench beneath the willow, reading something with a furrowed brow. He wasn't in a suit, hadn't worn one in weeks, but rather dark jeans and rolled sleeves, his hair a little longer than usual, like he was finally letting himself breathe. She walked toward him, the grass soft beneath her sandals. "Still working?" He looked up, folding the document. "Not exactly. Something came in from New York. A proposal. Business or personal?" "Both." She raised an eyebrow, curious. He stood, slipped the paper into his back pocket, and met her gaze. "They want to feature Fairlight House in a global philanthropy initiative. One of my foundations is backing it." "But they didn't know you were attached." Poppy blinked. "You didn't tell them?" "I didn't want anyone giving you anything because of me." She crossed her arms, not in defiance but in contemplation. "And now I think the world should see what you built." She hesitated, looking back toward the building, the tall windows glowing warm against the evening sky, laughter spilling faintly from the workshop where a few students lingered. "I didn't do this alone. You led it," he said. "No one else could have made it what it is." She looked at him, eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you going to disappear again if another project comes up?" "No," he said without pause. "I've stepped back. I handed off the last board seat last week." Her mouth parted. "You resigned." "I'm still invested," he said. "But I'm not running the show anymore. I don't want to be in 100 cities. I want to be here. With you." She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, quietly, "That's a big shift. I don't need to build empires anymore, Poppy. I already found what I was chasing." He reached into his front pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't flashy, no oversized diamond, no elaborate setting. Just a gold band with a single marquise-cut sapphire, deep blue and clear as ice. She froze. "Xavier, I didn't plan to do this today," he said. "But then I watched you talk to a 10-year-old girl about how art can heal grief, and I realized I didn't want to wait one more day." Her hands trembled. "I don't want titles or ceremonies or announcements. I just want you. Mornings with mismatched coffee mugs. Evenings where we argue over what movie to watch and fall asleep halfway through. A life that feels like ours, not like a schedule." She stared at him, speechless. "You said once you didn't want to be collected," he said softly. "This isn't me collecting you. This is me asking if I can belong to you." She stepped forward, took the ring, and slipped it on herself. "Then consider this your confirmation." He pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face into his neck, breathing in the scent of him, warm and familiar, and hers. When they kissed, it wasn't dramatic or frenzied. It was quiet and sure, like they'd both finally landed. Later that summer, they married in the garden behind Fairlight House, beneath a canopy of linen and ivy. There were no cameras, no press, just the people who mattered. Poppy wore a pale cream dress with embroidered lilacs. Xavier wore no tie, only a linen shirt and a look that never left her face. Lena, one of her first students, recited a poem she'd written about second chances. It made Poppy cry. Xavier held her hand the whole time. They danced barefoot beneath string lights, laughter echoing across the garden. At one point, he spun her around so quickly she nearly fell, and they both collapsed onto the grass, breathless and grinning. "You never told me what the New York proposal said in full," she murmured later as they lay on a blanket beneath the stars, her head on his chest. "They offered me a keynote slot at a global summit this fall. Said I was one of the world's most influential visionaries. And you said?" I told them the only vision I had was of a woman in a paint-splattered apron who built something more real than any skyscraper I've ever touched. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "That's a cheesy line. I've been saving it." She laughed and kissed his jaw. A year passed. The center expanded. They added a residency program, a scholarship fund, a small gallery. Poppy's dream grew into something that fed not just the community, but her own soul. She finally felt like she wasn't surviving anymore, she was thriving. Xavier started teaching business workshops for artists who'd never written a budget before. He still took calls, still signed deals, but his phone spent more time on the charger than in his hand. He became part of the ecosystem, no longer orbiting above, but rooted beside her. They traveled sometimes, but always came back. One crisp November morning, Poppy found him in the greenhouse, tending to the herbs like he did whenever he needed quiet. She stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment before stepping forward and taking his hand. "I have something to tell you," she said. He looked up instantly. "What is it?" She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a black and white photo, grainy but unmistakable. A tiny silhouette, not much bigger than a thumbprint. Xavier stared. "Is this?" She nodded, hands trembling now. He looked at her, stunned. "We're having a child?" She nodded again, unable to speak. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground, laughing against her shoulder. You've just given me the whole damn world." And it was true. Every part of their story had led here through chance and choice, through late nights and quiet truths, through a cafe seat and a resume with coffee stains. And now, they had a future written not in grand plans, but in mornings with baby socks on radiators and art projects on the kitchen floor. A life they built together, fully, completely, and without hesitation. The world could keep its empires. They had everything they needed.